Is on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the joint resolution S Joint Res 14.
Calendar number 48, Senate Joint Resolution 14, providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Environmental Protection Agency relating to oil and natural gas sector emissions standards for new, reconstructed, and modified sources review.
Under the provisions of Title 5 USC Chapter 802, there will now be up to 10 hours of debate equally divided.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, at the start of the year, the Senate Democrats pledged that one of our top priorities would be tackling climate change. I directed all of our incoming committee chairs to hold hearings and prepare legislation on the climate crisis. I promised that any infrastructure bill would be green and focus on creating the green jobs of the future. Both of these efforts, I'm happy to report, are well underway. And today, as we approach the 100-day mark of this new Congress, the Senate will take the first major step in combating climate change on the Senate floor by reinstating safeguards against methane emissions. Specifically, today's vote will use the Congressional Review Act to reimpose common sense regulations against methane leaks from the oil and gas industry, from production and processing to transmission and storage. And let me note, Mr. President, this will be the first time that the Senate Democratic majority has used the Congressional Review Act. It is no mistake we have chosen to use the law first on the subject of climate change. Under this Democratic majority, the Senate will be a place where we take decisive, ambitious, and effective action against climate change, and this CRA, the reinstatement of the rule dealing with methane emissions, will be the most significant act that the Senate has taken on climate change in more than a decade and maybe several decades. This measure will help us address the climate crisis in a very serious way. Methane doesn't get as much attention as CO2, as carbon dioxide, but it packs a bigger punch. Over 20 years, a ton of methane warms the atmosphere 86 times more than carbon dioxide. Thankfully, methane degrades faster in our atmosphere, and curbing methane emissions is relatively cheap. So when it comes to global warming, tackling methane delivers a huge bang for your buck. Even a little bit of methane reduction goes a long way, and it moves far more quickly than carbon dioxide reduction. So as we move on this bill, which will have its effect on global warming within a year, it gives us some time, although we don't have much, to deal with the longer-term and even more difficult issues of carbon dioxide. That's why President Obama put the rules in place nearly 6 years ago. And at the time, amazingly enough, even the oil and gas industry welcomed them. Industry doesn't want leaks in their pipeline and production any more than we do. But President Trump inexplicably did away with these safeguards last September. It seems he does these things out of pique, mindlessly opposing something just because his predecessor, Barack Obama, did it. It's very possible that the president didn't even understand what he was doing, but he so often acted out of anger and vindictiveness, not out of what was good for the country, that he ended up doing this. I'm greatly looking forward to righting that wrong today, hopefully in a bipartisan fashion. We have at least one Republican senator who has joined us, and I hope that many more, will follow suit. If the leaders of the oil and gas industry are for this, how could our Republican friends not vote for it? I won't speculate on the reasons, but none of them are good. I want to commend my colleagues who have been leaders on this issue. Senator Heinrich, Senator King, Senator Markey. President Biden has challenged the United States to cut its greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030. The best way to achieve this ambitious goal is through bold action by this Congress through legislation to reduce greenhouse pollution while creating millions of jobs and economic prosperity in the new clean energy economy. This is the first and large step in that direction. We have many more steps we must take, of course. The Senate begins the important work of dealing with the climate crisis today by passing these very, very significant common sense rules on methane. Now, on a different matter. This morning, President Biden unveiled landmark legislation designed to give American families a better chance to succeed in the 21st century economy, combining investments in education, child care, and workforce training. The American Families Plan, as it is called, makes exactly the types of investment our country should have been making for a very long time. In many of these areas, the United States has lagged well behind other developed countries. Governments throughout Europe dedicate a significantly higher portion of their GDP to workforce retraining and offering more flexible family leave policies. Some say these kinds of policies are not infrastructure, but they very much are. Child care is a necessity in the 21st century, and a lack of access to child care can be a throttle on future economic growth because it affects millions of American families. As technology and automation replace jobs in certain sectors of the economy, workforce training is a must. Giving our children a head start earlier in life with pre-K education has benefits that span a child's and our entire life, and so will affect our country positively for decades to come, economically, socially, and in renewing the American spirit, which is so important to our future. These things are just as important. The kinds of policies that deal with human infrastructure are just as important as roads and bridges, which, of course, are no doubt important in their own right. This is not an either-or. Human infrastructure or brick-and-mortar structure, we must say yes to both. We don't want to choose one versus the other. That's like choosing between children, both of which we love. In the modern world, we need both infrastructure that matches a 21st century economy and human infrastructure that allows our workers and families to succeed in it. So I applaud President Biden for putting this plan together. It's just the right approach. And I would add one final comment here. All of our Republican colleagues, every single one, regrettably, chose to oppose the American Rescue Plan, despite the fact that a majority of Republican voters approved of the legislation. There seems to be a huge dichotomy between Republicans in Washington and Republicans in the rest of the country who approve of many of the policies in President Biden's plans. Republicans in the rest of the country approved of the checks and investing in vaccines, and they approve of investing in infrastructure. I suspect many of these policies in the American Families Plan will get high marks as well. Child care is popular, early pre-K is popular, early schoolhood training is popular, free community college is popular. The list goes on. Will our Republican colleagues start to listen to their constituents as well as the rest of the country? Or are they still the party of Donald Trump, a party that opposes the other side at all costs? That's no good for America. That's no good for bipartisanship. And it's not even good for the Republican Party's future. Now, tonight, President Biden will address a joint session of Congress to mark the progress of our first 100 days and talk about where we as a country still need to go. I expect President Biden, unlike his predecessor, will lay out the facts and appeal to our better angels. That's what he's been doing over these past 100 days, restoring effective, truthful, and responsive government. Almost as important is what President Biden is not doing. President Biden is not constantly stoking division, outrage, racial animus. He doesn't fan the flames of every single culture war. He doesn't seek to personally dominate every single news cycle. He doesn't insult, degrade, or constantly lie. And it matters. Newspapers are littered with firsthand accounts of Americans who feel they can finally sleep at night without worrying about what new scandal, outrage, or unhinged tweet the next morning would bring. As one Republican operative put it recently, now there's a sense of relief. Imagine that there's a car alarm that's been going off for a long time, and suddenly it's quiet. Politics is an important part of American life, but it's not meant to be all-consuming. It's not supposed to keep average citizens up at night. Politics is supposed to be where we come together to solve our differences amicably, not an arena of endless partisan warfare or a bottomless pit of chaos. So as President Biden prepares to address the nation tonight, it's worth noting that as much as we've accomplished in the first 100 days, the contrast in style, tone, and effectiveness between President Biden and President Trump is important too. As we seek to repair the wounds left by January 6th, as we seek to restore faith in government and in our democracy, it's important, so important, to have political leaders who act with dignity, honor, and have fidelity to the truth. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from New Mexico.
Mr. President.